Good morning. Glad you could make it. The hour of convening has arrived, and the Senate will come to order. At this time, I would ask that all unauthorized persons exit our beautiful chamber. Chair would like to recognize the distinguished, but I will make mention, the late senator. You were late here, not late. From the 53rd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a beautiful day here at our Capitol, and a legendary figure just walked in the door, the senator from the 15th. Moment in history.
The Dean of the Senate.
The Dean of the Senate, and yes, sir. The Battle of Tunnel Hill happened in 1864, and I say that because it's right down the street from me. And today is National Dance Day, which again is one of the senator from the 15th and 34th favorite day. The journal's been read and found to be correct, Mr. President.
I've become accustomed to more facts and figures than that. But we'll adjust today. We'll adjust. Is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal? The chair hears none, and the reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions, please bring them to the Secretary's desk. Mr. Secretary, first reading of Senate bills and resolutions, please.
Senate Bill 236 by Senators Brass of the 28th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title III of the OCGA relating to alcoholic beverages so as to allow food service establishments licensed to sell distilled spirits for consumption on the premises to sell mixed drinks for
regulated industries.
Senate Bill 237 by Senators Harbison of the 15th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 40-2-86 of the OCGA relating to special license plates promoting or supporting certain worthy agencies, funds, or nonprofit corporations.
Veterans, military, and homeland security.
Senate Bill 238 by Senator Strickland of the 17th, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 1 of the OCGA relating to general provisions so as to revise provisions relating to the enactment of the OCGA.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 239 by Senators Harrell of the 40th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 20 of the OCGA relating to education so as to provide that tuition and mandatory student fees.
Higher education.
Senate Bill 240 by Senators Harrell of the 40th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to competencies and core curriculum so as to provide for instructional
education and youth.
Senate Bill 241 by Senators Dugan of the 30th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to comprehensively revise elections and votings to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections.
Ethics.
Senate Bill 242 by Senators Cowsert of the 46th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 4 of Chapter 12 of Title 15 of the OCGA relating to grand juries so as to provide for a state grand jury to provide
Judiciary.
Senate Resolution 143 by Senators Harbin of the 16th and others, a resolution appointing the honorary position of General Assembly Chaplain and for other purposes.
Rules.
This completes the order, Mr. President.
First reading and reference of House bills and resolutions, please.
House Bill 68 by Representatives Clark of the 147th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 43-14-15 of the OCGA relating to certain military certifications that entitle persons
Veterans,
to obtain.
military, and homeland security.
Senate Bill 119 by Representatives Hawkins of the 27th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 14-7-4 of the OCGA relating to professional services in which a professional corporation may engage so as to provide
Health and Human Services.
House Bill 149 by Representatives Williamson of the 115th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 7 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to income taxes so as to allow for certain elections to be made.
Finance.
House Bill 161 by Representatives Tankersley of the 160th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 42 of Title 36 of the OCGA relating to Downtown Development Authority so as
Government
to remove
oversight.
House Bill 210 by Representatives Corbett of the 174th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 3 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to certificates of title to motor vehicles so as to exempt certain vehicles from the recording of odometer readings.
Transportation.
House Bill 223 by Representatives Benton of the 31st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act to create a Board of Elections and Registration for Jackson County approved April 20th, 2011 as amended particularly
State
by
and local government.
House Bill 241 by Representatives Gamble of the 15th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 33-7-6 of the OCGA relating to property insurance, contract requirements, rules and regulations, and exemptions.
Insurance and labor.
House Bill 245 by Representative LaHood of the 175th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 35 of Title 43 of the OCGA relating to posterity practice so as to amend a provision.
Health and Human Services.
House Bill 305 by Representative Hawkins of the 27th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 24A of Title 43 of the OCGA relating to the practice of massage therapy so as to revise a
Health and
definition.
Human Services.
House Bill 342 by Representative Washburn of the 141st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 14 of Title 43 of the OCGA relating to electrical contractors, plumbers, conditioned air contractors.
Economic Development.
House Bill 354 by Representative Williams of the 145th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 43 of the OCGA relating to professions and businesses so as to require state
Special
board.
Judiciary.
House Bill 367 by Representatives Parrish of the 158th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 13 of Title 16 of the OCGA relating to controlled substances so as to change certain provisions relating to Schedule 1, 2,
Public
3.
Safety.
House Bill 374 by Representatives Gaines of the 117th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 8 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to sales and use taxes so as to exempt from taxation local authorities providing public water.
Finance.
This completes the order, Mr. Oh, my apologies.
We snuck in a back page for you.
House Bill 396 by Representatives Green of the 151st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to repeal an act creating the South Georgia Regional Information Technology Authority approved May 29th.
State and local government.
House Bill 456 by Representative Smith of the 18th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act providing for the Carroll County Board of Elections approved April 29th, 1997.
Slow go.
House Bill 490 by Representative Hill of the 3rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act creating the Office of Commissioner of Catoosa County approved February 12, 1943.
Slow go.
This completes the order, Mr. President.
Mr. Secretary, will you please read reports of standing committees?
You're doing great. Slow down a little.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Economic Development and Tourism has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 158, do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Thompson of the 14th. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 215, do pass by substitute. Senate Bill 235, do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson of the 1st. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Higher Education has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 97, do pass by substitute. Senate Bill 107, do pass by substitute. Senate Bill 187, do pass. Senate Bill 204, do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Tippins of the 37th. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 174, do pass. Senate Bill 183, do pass. Senate Bill 198, do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers of the 56th. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 102, do pass by committee substitute. Senate Bill 145, do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Cowser of the 46th. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Rules has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 221, do pass. Senate Resolution 117, do pass. Senate Resolution 125, do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Mullis of the 53rd. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Mr. Secretary, will you please read bills and resolutions for the second time?
Senate Bill 47 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Act, revised prior school year requirement. Senate Bill 66 by Senator Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others, Georgia Foundation for Public Education, a nonprofit corporation created by the foundation to receive private donations to be used for grants to public schools, authorized. Senate Bill 78 by Senators Jones II of the 22nd and others, invasion of privacy, prohibition on electronically transmitting or posting nude or sexually explicit photographs or videos for purposes of harassing the depicted person, revised. Senate Bill 84 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others, Max Grover Act, enact. Senate Bill 93 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, elections and primaries, use of portable and movable polling facilities in certain circumstances, provide. Senate Bill 96 by Senator Jackson II and others, notaries public, identification of persons for whom notaries perform notarial acts shall be evidenced, valid Veterans Health Identification Card issued by the United States Department of Veteran Affairs, provide. Senate Bill 120 by Senator Tippins of the 37th and others, Solicitors General of State Courts, Honorary Office of Solicitor General, Immuteris, provide. Senate Bill 141 by Senator Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others, Elections and Primaries, Immediate Counting and Tabulation of Ballots after the close of the polls until such counting and tabulation is completed, provide. Senate Bill 143 by Senator Tippins of the 37th and others, Mechanics and Material Men, Waiver of Lien and Labor or Material Bonds Right, conform a reference with a statutory form. Senate Bill 144 by Senator Tippins of the 37th and others, Housing Authorities, Ability of City Housing Authority to operate outside municipal boundaries without authorization limit. Senate Bill 159 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, Elementary and Secondary Education, Provision relating to student transportation, revised. Senate Bill 182 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, Counties and Municipal Corporations Fence Detection System, define the term counties, consolidated governments, and municipalities regulate or prohibit such system, limit the ability. Senate Bill 193 by Senator Mullis of the 53rd and others, ad valorem taxation of property, requiring that mobile homes procure and display decals, grant counties the option. Senate Bill 201 by Senator Huffsettler of the 52nd and Revenue and Taxation, financial institutions to provide certain information related to delinquent taxpayers of the Department of Revenue under certain conditions require. Senate Resolution 37 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others, members of the Senate, 4-year term of office, provide. Senate Resolution 100 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, statewide grand juries, jurisdiction, powers, and duties, provide. House Bill 105 by Representative Clark of the 147th and others, military, pay for certain active duty by the organized militia, authorize. Senate Bill 129 by Representative Watson of the 172nd and others, sheriff's compensation, modify certain provisions. This completes the order, Mr. President.
That was a long list of productive committees yesterday. It's now time for a morning roll call. It is now time for morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President and y'all, and good morning. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the following senators, the senator from the 35th and the senator from the 38th for business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senators from the 35th and 38th are excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 27th.
Without objection, the senator from the 27th is excused. Are there any additional motions to excuse? Going once, going twice. Mr. Secretary, Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd.
Mr. President, I move unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 20th for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 20th is excused. All right. Any more motions to excuse? Chair hears none. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll of senators? Signify your presence by voting the yea switch. The Secretary will unlock the machine.
I get a rubber band.
Have all senators voted their attendance? We're good out in the hallway. Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. All right, it's now time for a morning devotional. And I would ask that all senators take your seats and cease all audible conversations. Doorkeepers, please secure the chamber at this time. Chair would like to recognize a senator from the 16th to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance and to introduce to us our chaplain of the day.
Thank you, sir. Pledge to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Georgia flag. I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag, to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation. All right. Well, good morning and welcome. I am honored to be able to introduce our pastor of the day. He is no stranger to this chamber. He is a great friend and is a man of God, but not only a man of God, but someone who speaks the truth for God as well. Dr. Benny Tate served for 30 years as a senior pastor for Rock Springs Church in Milner, Georgia. Now, I like what he says. Milner, if you go there, he says that the zip code is E-I-E-I-O. That's how far out they live, or where they are in the middle of nowhere. If real estate is location, they have defied all the odds, but a fantastic place to go. The church has grown from 80 members in attendance to more than 8,000 and has 7 campuses. The following ministries as part of Rock Springs is their Rock Springs Medical Clinic, which provides health care to people who do not have insurance, which I think is a phenomenal ministry. Rock Springs Christian Academy, K through 12, a school that's there, and the Potter House for Women and Impact Street Ministries to care for those that are homeless. Great ministry from that standpoint for those that are down and out and helping them get out. Dr. Tate serves as the president of the Congregational Methodist denomination and has served many times as chaplain to the United States Senate, so he's stepping down for us a little bit here, and the United States House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. He's authored 4 books, One More Night with the Frogs, Happy Wife, Happy Life. Some of you guys need to read that one. When You Have Followed the Star and Find a Stable, and then Bennyisms. I would also mention that Benny and his wife Barbara have been married for 35 years and have 1 daughter, Savannah Abigail, and they live in Forsyth, Georgia. In your offices will be delivered through the postal systems. I was going to put these in the chamber for you, but provided you a book, his Bennyisms, that you may want to look for. I'll just give you a real quick line on relationships, three bullet points. Our friend walks when everybody else is walking out. In prosperity, our friends know us. In adversity, we know our friends. And the last one is this: no need to defend yourself from criticism. Your friends don't need it, and your critics won't believe it anyway. So with that, I ask Dr. Benny Tate if he would share with us this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Good morning. So good to see everyone, and it's really my privilege. It's my privilege and honor to get to be here, and I just want to begin by saying thank you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your sacrifice. I say that to every member of this body because it simply is that. It's a service, and it is a sacrifice to serve, and so I'm just greatly appreciative. And before I get started, I'll just say this to you. I'll say to you what Elizabeth Taylor said to her 8th husband. I'm not going to keep you long. Amen? All right. Not going to keep you long. I'm Brother Jeff's type of preacher. All right. Not going to keep you long. All right. I want to share scripture with you from 2 Timothy 1:7. This is what the scripture says. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind." For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. I heard about a couple, Tom and Ethel. They'd been married for about 50 years. And every night when Tom would get to sleep, Ethel would nudge him and she'd say, I hear something downstairs. You need to go downstairs. And that went on for almost 50 years. He'd put on his house shoes, he'd go downstairs, and there would be nothing down there. Finally, one night, she nudged him after almost 50 years, and she said, Tom, I hear something downstairs. Tom goes downstairs, and there's a guy down there disconnecting his LED TV. And Tom says, stop, stop. And the guy's kind of startled. And the guy says, please don't harm me. Tom says, no, I'm not going to harm you. He said, I want you to do me a favor. He said, oh, you want me to do you a favor? What's the favor? He said, I want you to come upstairs because my wife has been looking for you every night for 50 years. Max Lucado said this. He said, the presence of fear does not mean we have no faith. Fear visits everyone, but we want to make fear a visitor instead of a resident. We want to make fear a visitor instead of a resident. You say, Pastor, how can you have faith over fear? Well, that verse tells us God's not given us the spirit of fear, but of power. I just want to say to you this morning that if you know Christ, you've been endued with power. I want you to know something. You're not alone. Because 1 John 4:4 says, greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. The Holy Spirit is inside of us if we know Christ. I want every one of you to know if you know Christ, you've been endued with power. But not only have you been endued with power, you've been enriched with love. God's not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love. You know, for years there was a verse that bothered me. It's 1 John 4:18. It says, perfect love casts out fear. And I said, God, I must not be loving you perfectly because I have fear in my heart. Then I realized something. That's not talking about my love for God. It's talking about God's love for me. It's talking about the fact that God loves us perfectly. I want you to know something. You've been endued by power, with power. You've been enriched with love. But you've been enlightened with a sound mind. God's not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. Barbara, my wife, and I have been married for 36 years. We got married years ago, and we just decided divorce is not going to be a part of our vocabulary. Murder is, but divorce is not. We made a pact years ago that we'd never, Brother Ed, we made a pact that we'd never go to bed upset at each other. We never have. Now, we've stayed up for 2 or 3 days at a time, but we've never gone to bed upset at each other. But Tyler, one time I said to my wife, I said, honey, what was it that attracted me to you? I said, was it my vivacious personality? She said, no. I said, was it my muscular body? You don't have to laugh. She said, no. I said, was it my good looks? She said, no. I said, well, Barbara, what attracted you to me to you? And she said, Benny, it was your mind. I said, my mind? She said, yes, it's the little things that count. Here's what I want everybody to know. God's endued us with power. He's enriched us with his love. But he's enlightened us with a sound mind. And I just want to give you something in conclusion. In conclusion, Brother Max. A little girl stayed all night with my little girl one night when she was real small, and that little girl didn't go to church. And I said, in conclusion, and that little girl said to my daughter, Savannah Abigail, when your daddy says that, what does that mean? And Savannah said, absolutely nothing. But in conclusion, I want to give you this. Psalms 139 and 5 says this: you go before me and follow me. You go before me and follow me. Senators, I want you to know this. God is in front of you, and Jesus is behind you. You go before me and follow me. Now wait. God's in front of you, Jesus is behind you, and the Holy Spirit is inside you. If it wasn't for my Methodist dignity, I'd shout. Listen, God is in front of you. You okay? Yes, sir. Yes. Hey, listen, hey, you're with me, sister. Look, God is in front of you. Jesus is behind you. The Holy Spirit is inside you. And then Psalms 34 and 7 says, the angels encamp round about you. Now wait, God is in front of you. Jesus is behind you. The Holy Spirit is inside you. The angels encamp round about you. Oh, but it doesn't end there. Hebrews 12 and 1 says, those that are in heaven, those that are in heaven's grandstands, they're there cheering you on. They're telling you not to quit. They're telling you to stay in the fight. See, there's no need for you to be fearful because God is in front of you. Jesus is behind you. The Holy Spirit is inside you. Angels are all around you. Heaven is cheering you on so we can have faith over fear. I believe if a mosquito would bite me right now, sis, it would leave singing, there's power in the blood. Amen? This is all I'm going to say. And I just sense, I wouldn't have gone this long if I didn't just sense something. But I want you to understand something. You all know your Bible. And in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 13, it says there's three things that must remain. Three things that's got to remain. Faith, hope, and love. Same thing, sis, charity. Faith, hope, and love. Wait, a year ago, COVID comes on the scene. And we encounter fear. Not only do we encounter fear, COVID comes on the scene and we encounter despair. We become desperate. Not only does COVID come on the scene and we encounter fear and we encounter despair, but we encounter anger. We're angry toward one another. God said there's three things that's got to remain because the antidote for fear is faith, and the antidote for despair is hope, and the antidote for anger is love. And I want you to know Jesus Christ is the answer. Let us pray. As I bow my head before you, I thank you for the high honor and distinguished privilege of being with these wonderful people. I thank you for the Lieutenant Governor Duncan. I thank you for the senators in this body, their sacrifice and their service. But Lord, you just sent me by today to remind them that you hadn't given them the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. May your blessings rest upon this body of people. Bless them and keep them. Make your face to shine upon them. Be gracious unto them. Lift your countenance upon them. May they experience your peace. For I pray this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for the honor.
Senate will come back to order. Are there any unanimous consents? Chair sees none. Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? The chair recognizes the senator from the 29th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues and fellow senators, I was contacted a few days ago in a casual conversation by one of our colleagues and advised that while they were out the night before with a couple of friends, that their vehicles were broken into here in Atlanta.
Senator, would you hold on a moment? Look, I know we got a lot going on, and we're getting close to crossover day, but please give the respect due to the senator in the well. If you have a conversation that you have to have, I would encourage you to use the anterooms for those conversations. Thank you.
As I was saying the other night, I was advised by one of our colleagues that his vehicle had been broken into while he was out with a couple of friends, and each of those friends, their vehicles had been broken into also here in Atlanta. As I was explaining this to someone, they asked me if there were any valuables in any of the vehicles, and I told them yes, that there were a couple of computers and some other electronics in the vehicle. The person I was talking to said, well, shouldn't people know not to leave stuff in their vehicles? And I want to tell you, I'm normally a fairly calm person, but nothing raises my temperature more than when somebody blames the victim of a crime. And it seems that society, every day now, we spend a whole lot of time discussing why somebody commits crimes, what pushes somebody there, what fracture in their life caused them to resort to that kind of behavior. And I do think that is a worthwhile conversation to have. But one thing we seem to forget in these conversations is there are victims on the end of every one of these actions. And if you want to look at somebody to blame for somebody's computer, somebody's valuables from being stolen from their vehicle, from their home, from their person, then the first place you look at is you look at the individual who committed the crime. Then you look at the individual who taught that individual that those things are acceptable in society. And then you look at those elected officials in cities and communities throughout our country that allow these kinds of things to happen in communities. And when we try to address them, when we try to put sorts of punishments and sanctions out against criminals, they push back against it, looking for sympathy for the criminal, but very, very little sympathy for the victim. So what I encourage my brothers and sisters in this chamber to do is let's start focusing more attention on helping victims recover, and maybe a little less attention on making excuses for the guilty who break into cars and for the politicians who promote that behavior, especially in a city that we should be proud of, like the city of Atlanta. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. The chair recognizes the senator from the 12th for a point of personal privilege.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I have purchased books for everyone in the Senate. This book was written by Dr. Terrence Ferguson, who owns Critter Fixer in Byron, Georgia. Dr. Ferguson is my first cousin and also a graduate of Fort Valley State University. And Dr. Bernard Hodges, who has a clinic in the senator from the 20th, I think, in Warner Robins, Georgia also. They are partners, and they both went to school together. They also attended UGA, Tuskegee Institute, and Auburn University to complete their studies in veterinary science. They also starred in the National Geographic series called Country Vets. So if you ever get a chance to, or if you have an evening, I think the series has been re-upped for this year. Last year was their first season, and this will be their second season. If you do not, the copies will be delivered to your offices. If you do not plan on keeping the book, please return it. I won't tell that you returned your book, but we can always use it in the libraries and pass it on to the teachers to use in their classrooms. But it's a nice little booklet for children. And I want to thank him and appreciate these two gentlemen for what they do in their communities. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Senator. She's yielded the well. Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning. It's my honor to introduce the doctor of the day today, Dr. Reggie Mason, who has been with us before. So I want to, right off the bat, thank him for being someone who regularly shares his services and expertise with us here at the General Assembly. Dr. Mason is a board-certified physician specializing in lung diseases and critical care medicine. Since 1991, he has been with the Southeast Permanente Medical Group, which most of you know is part of Kaiser Permanente. He currently serves as the organization's physician lead for total health. He is committed to improving the health of Metro Atlantans, often speaking to businesses, schools, and community groups about the importance of healthy eating and active living. And normally when he's in the chamber with us, he gives us a couple tips on healthy eating and active living. So I'm just going to put in a plug for you to do those things that I know we should all be doing in the first place. He went to Stanford University for undergrad and the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine. Then he did his internal medicine internship and residency at George Washington University Hospital in Washington, D.C., which is actually where I was born. So I love him even more for that. Then he went back to California and came here. He runs frequently and earned the country's #2 ranking in the 400-meter dash in his age group. So he is training alongside the sport's current superstars at the Atlanta site used in the 1996 Olympics. He's married to Dr. Karen Goodlett, who is also a Permanente doctor, and he has 2 children. Thank you, as always, Dr. Mason, for sharing your expertise and time with us. Thank you. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise as we are wrapping up the final days of Black History Month, and I want to share with you information about a woman of Georgia, from Southwest Georgia, a woman whose the relationship we've had together I treasure deeply, but a national and an international contributor to the cultural voice for freedom and justice. I speak of Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan. Dr. Reagan was born in 1942 in Albany, Georgia. She attended Albany State College, and she was actually in Dougherty County born. Home church and school were partners in the small rural African-American community that sheltered the Johnson family. Reagan counts her participation in the civil rights movement while a college student at Albany State College. She was expelled. We're approaching the 60th anniversary of the Albany movement. And in that movement, students at that campus marched downtown for the right to vote and then came back to their campus to be expelled by the administration. Some of these things that we look at in our history are almost hard to believe today. She became a member of the original SNCC Freedom Singers. That's the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that John Lewis served as the head of. She sang with the Freedom Singers nationally and internationally, and they raised money for the movement. And that singing and song are a constant in Bernice Johnson Reagan's life. As she earned her master's at Howard University, she formed the African American women's a cappella ensemble Sweet Honey in the Rock that she led till 2004. And they notably sang to welcome Nelson Mandela when he arrived in New York after being released from prison. She is Professor Emeritus of History at American University and Curator Emeritus at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. She has made countless albums. I always think of Bernice when I think of the song that she wrote. I don't know how my mama walked her troubles down. I don't know how my daddy stood his ground. I don't know how my people survived slavery, but standing in the windstorm, I believe. Bernice has given her life to the struggle for justice and equality. I'm so happy to honor today the incredible life that she has lived and the contributions that she's made. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. You have a consent calendar of privileged resolutions before you. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? The chair hears none. Is there objection to adoption of the resolutions on the consent calendar? Chair hears none, and the resolutions on the consent calendar are adopted. For what purpose does the senator from the 21st rise?
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that SB 162 be withdrawn from the Committee on Appropriations and be committed to the Committee on Judiciary.
Mr. Secretary, will you please read the caption?
Senate Bill 162 by Senator Beach of the 21st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 15-2 of the OCGA relating to the number of judges of Superior Court so as to provide for an additional judge of the Superior Court of the Blue Ridge Judicial Circuit, to provide for related matters, to provide for effective dates, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator, have both chairmen approved of this move?
Yes, sir, they have.
The senator from the 21st has moved that Senate Bill 214 be withdrawn from the Committee on Judiciary and be recommitted to the Committee on Public Safety. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and it is so. Let's do this again. I was looking into the future. Senator from the 21st has asked for unanimous consent that Senate Bill 162 be withdrawn from the Committee on Appropriations and be committed to Judiciary. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and that is so. Are there any additional motions to withdraw and commit? Chair recognizes the senator from the 7th.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent Senate Bill 214 be withdrawn from the Committee on Judiciary and be committed to the Committee on Public Safety.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption?
Senate Bill 214 by Senator Harper of the 7th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 3 of Chapter 3 of Title 38 of the OCGA relating to the governor's emergency powers so as to restrict the use of emergency powers on matters pertaining to firearms and other weapons, to provide for definitions, to provide for a cause of action, to provide for the recovery of damages, to provide for the suspension of statutory speedy trial requirements when compliance, and for other purposes. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator, have both chairmen approved? They have. All right, the senator from the 7th has asked for unanimous consent that Senate Bill 214 be withdrawn from the Committee on Judiciary and be committed to Public Safety. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and the bill is moved. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the following bills be engrossed. House Bill 265, Senate Bill 89, Senate Bill 148.
Mr. Secretary, will you please read the captions? Easy for me to say today.
House Bill 265 by Representative Knight of the 130th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 48 of the OCGA relating to revenue and taxation so as to provide the terms Internal Revenue Code and Internal Revenue Code of 1986 and thereby incorporate certain provisions of and for other purposes. Senate Bill 89 by Senator Miller of the 49th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally so as to provide for a chief election assistant officer, to provide for qualifications, appointment, supervision, and duties of such officers, to provide for election assistant coaches, to provide for, and other purposes. Senate Bill 148 by Senator Hofstetler of the 52nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 28 of the OCGA relating to General Assembly so as to create the 2021 Special Council on Tax Reform and Fairness for Georgians and the Special Joint Committee on Georgia Revenue Structure, to state legislative findings and intent, to make provisions relative to legislative procedure, and for other purposes. This completes the order, Mr. President.
The Majority Leader has asked for unanimous consent that House Bill 265, Senate Bill 89, Senate Bill 148 be engrossed. Is there objection? There is objection. Would the Majority Leader? He waives. Would the Minority Leader like to speak to the objection? She waives. The questions on the motion from the Majority Leader to engross House Bill 265, Senate Bill 89, and Senate Bill 148. All those in favor of the motion to engross will vote aye. Opposed, no. The Secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the motion to engross, the yeas are 34, the nays are 20, and House Bill 265, Senate Bill 89, and Senate Bill 148 are engrossed. We're now going to move on to the rules calendar. Mr. Secretary, will you please read the caption of Senate Bill 119?
Senate Bill 119 by Senator Harper of the 7th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 12-60-90 of the OCGA relating to permit required for burning woods, lands, marshes, or other flammable vegetation and exceptions so as to accept certain yard waste from permitting. The Senate Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Harper of the 7th. The Senate Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 119, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 12-6-90 of the OCGA relating to permit required for burning woods, lands, marshes, or other flammable vegetation and exceptions so as to accept certain yard waste from permitting. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from Ocilla to present Senate Bill 119.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, colleagues, Senate Bill 119 is fairly simple. It would allow individuals to burn yard debris and hand-piled vegetation without notifying the Georgia Forestry Commission. Under current law, the way it is set up, when you have to notify the Forestry Commission that you're going to burn hand-piled or hand-piled vegetation or yard debris. But the Georgia Forestry Commission has no legal control over the location or timing when that occurs. This sets up parameters to provide for location and timing under certain conditions that you would be allowed to do so at your responsibility. And if it falls outside of those confines, you can still call the Georgia Forestry Commission and get the permit and notify them of such. This would it has the impact of hopefully decreasing possible wildfires, among other things, and also as a cost savings for the department. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I would yield the well.
Your friend, the Rules Chairman, has a question. Do you yield?
I will yield, Mr. President.
The chair recognizes the quick-witted Rules Chairman for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. What pressure? Senator Yield.
I yield.
Now, is Smokey the Bear still the Department of Natural Resources or Natural Resources mascot for burning and so forth?
He is the national mascot, yes, sir, for burning and so forth.
Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
Do you think maybe we need to find a new mascot about so high, maybe from Ocilla, that would do a great job in helping people understand the dangers of burning in their yard?
That is a possibility, Mr. Chairman.
No other questions.
Thank you very much.
Was there a question in there somewhere, Senator? Any other senators have any questions? The chair sees none. You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for your favorable consideration and one point of clarification. Unless it's prohibited by local ordinance or state statute or EPD rule, this would apply, and I meant to say that earlier, but thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 119? The chair sees none. The questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 100?
Senate Bill 100 by Senator Watson I and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 50 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to state government so as to provide that this state shall observe standard time year-round until such time as Congress authorizes the states to observe daylight savings time. The Senate Committee on Government Oversight recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Harbin of the 16th. Government Oversight offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 100, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 50 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to state government so as to provide that this state shall observe standard time year-round until such time as Congress authorizes the state to observe daylight savings time. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from Savannah to present Senate Bill 100.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm here today to present Senate Bill 100. Let me just tell you what it does. This bill does not change the time of the day. It allows the time to stay the same. We're still going to be getting up in the morning and getting up in the going to bed in the evening. What this bill does is change the way we measure the time. This bill moves us to standard time year-round, and when Congress allows us, which we are not able to do now, when it allows us to go to daylight savings time, we would go to daylight savings time at that time. Let me just give a little bit of the history. I'm going to talk about the whys, what's going on in our surrounding states, the big picture, and then referendum. So the history of time, we've been adjusting time since man has been in existence. Just less than 200 years ago, we were actually going by the sun clock, which was synced to our body clock, right? But that was chaotic, especially when it came to railroads. In World War I, we did go to a daylight savings time. That was for about 1 year to preserve daylight in the evening and burn less electricity. In World War II, we went to saving daylight for about 3 years. In 1967, we made the decision at that time to go to daylight savings time and standard time. Well, as you know, 2 weeks in the spring and 2 weeks in the fall, we have disruptive sleep. So this sort of goes to the why we would consider changing to year-round standard time. Looking at the data, if we're looking at the Journal of Clinical Medicine for daylight savings time, shows that there's a significantly higher percentage of heart attacks during the spring forward time. So one reason there'll be less heart attacks if we do not do a spring shift. In the Journal of Biological Rhythms, when it comes to, that was published in June of 2019, why should we abolish daylight savings time? That goes to the same circadian rhythms relating to our rhythms in sleep. There's a fun little article in the Association of Psychological Science, talks about grumpy judges. In the springtime of that 2 weeks, judges punish people much harsher than they do at other times of the year. So we have grumpy judges due to sleep deprivation giving people harsher sentences. And then the one that spurred me, and if you've been around for a while, you know that I've been talking about this for probably 2.5, 3 years or so, and we passed a referendum to put on the ballot last year, a non-binding referendum to put on the ballot out of the Senate, but because of the pandemic, it did not get across. But last fall, September 1, 2020, in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine, last fall, it goes that the abundance of accumulated evidence indicates that the acute transition from standard time to daylight saving times, and that's a fancy way of saying it has significant impact on public health, safety risk of adverse cardiovascular events, in other words, more heart attacks, mood disorders, and motor vehicle crashes. They recommended going to standard time, which is closer to the biological clock. Again, I want to say that the federal law does not allow a change to permanent daylight savings time. It does allow a change to permanent standard time. So there are other articles I have here, and I'll be happy to talk to you about that offline. In our surrounding states, what's going on? So on the west, Alabama's in Central Standard Time, but on our side, here on South Carolina, southern border, Florida, and up in Tennessee, which actually has 2 time zones. Remember, Florida has 2 time zones. They have put into state law that if Congress ever acts, like we would be in the same position, that we would move to daylight savings time all year round. So Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida. There is a bill in Congress that's been introduced from one of the senators from Florida about this particular piece of legislation. So the big picture is that you don't need me up here telling you that 2 weeks in the spring and 2 weeks in the fall that your sleep is disrupted. There's no doubt about that. What the big conversation really should be is that we should have schools, hospitals, businesses looking at this and making adjustments in their own time. That's really the big conversation that we should be having. What I do is I ask for your favorable consideration relating to this bill so we can continue the conversation. Maybe we'll end up in a referendum. Maybe we'll make the final decision ourselves. But I would ask you to let's move this forward to standard time all year round, and if Congress allows, to move us to daylight savings time for when that happens. Mr. President, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 41st for a question.
Senator, do you yield?
I do.
Senator, why do you prefer daylight savings time?
Be honest with you, why do I prefer daylight savings time? You know, that's just my personal preferences. I think if you look at the polls, it's probably maybe a 40-50% prefer daylight savings time, maybe 20-30% prefer standard time, maybe a little bit more than that, and then some in the middle or on the fringes, depending on which way you look at it, just don't want to make any changes at all. Sort of goes along with our personalities. But I don't have a dog in the fight about which one we go to. What I would like us to recognize and look to is just not changing year-round so that we're not messing up our circadian rhythms in the spring and in the fall.
Do you further yield?
I do.
Senator, have you considered joining South Carolina and Florida in simply waiting until Congress takes action as opposed to making us go to standard time right now?
I've considered that, but waiting on Congress may be an eternity. That's my personal thoughts. And you know, that may be what we end up doing as it goes across to the House, or may end up with a referendum. I'm not Pollyannish to think that this is the end all to be all. It may be that we end up changing it 30 minutes or so forth. But yes, we should do it in conjunction with all the states around us.
Do you further yield?
I do.
In the video that you showed us in government oversight, the expert that you brought talked about American citizens preferring to have their daylight in the evening time versus in the morning. However, your bill proposes to put us in standard time, which will give our daylight in the morning, indefinitely. So how do you explain to regular Georgians who like having their evenings have light, how do you explain to them why we would make this decision?
Well, as we talked about in the committee, and thank you for your question, I really appreciate that, because again, I want us to get us in a thoughtful posture here. You know, if we change it to daylight savings time, and he's a history professor, is what he is that if you have more daylight in the evening, in that December 22nd, as one of our colleagues pointed out, then you'll have darkness in the morning that will have sunrise at around 8:25 in the morning on that December 22nd time frame. You know how dark it is in the morning. There's some experts, you know, again, my personal anecdote is that I've had the trauma surgeons at Memorial, where I practice medicine, are concerned about the children in the morning relating to trauma. And it really goes to the point of the conversations. What we really should be doing is that, again, you know, the businesses, the hospitals, and the schools, they really need to make adjustments in the time, probably at other times.
Senator, do you further yield?
Yes.
Have you had conversations with the Chamber of Commerce in Savannah and other places about the fiscal impact that losing an hour in the evening would have on restaurants and concert venues that enjoy having that additional daylight time in the evenings to bring about tourists to come and visit?
I appreciate that. Of course, this conversation's been out there for about 2.5 years, but we're really not, again, we're not changing the amount of daylight, so you're not really losing any time on that. But I appreciate your thought on that.
And one final question, if
Certainly.
you would yield.
Yes.
Senator, as a doctor, are you familiar with seasonal affect disorder and its implications on people in terms of their emotional well-being? Yes, so there's been research that indicates that daylight savings time is what helps people get out of that depression, that seasonal depression that they experience. And so there are concerns, and I wonder how you would respond to this, that going into standard time would further and lengthen that time of depression that people with seasonal affect disorder would experience.
Yeah, again, we're not changing the amount of daylight that's there. That is not changed, and it gets to the conversation that we should be having relating to that. And as you know, and I do that, That was the Journal of Sleep Medicine that was specifically addressed mood disorders, which includes seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. And they recommended that we go to standard time year-round. But I certainly appreciate your question.
Thank you, Senator.
Do you continue to yield?
Yes.
Chair recognizes the freshman senator from the 4th for a question. Your button's pushed. You must be excited about your next bill. Might want to go talk to your neighboring senator, the Appropriations Chairman, about how that button works.
Yeah, I think I will end it on that. Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for your
Senator
favorable
has
consideration.
yielded the well. Any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 100? The chair sees none. The question's on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 46, the nays are 7. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. The chair, where's the senator from the 1st? The chair's never heard the use of less heart attacks and lighter judicial sentencing in the same speech from the well all at the same time. That was impressive. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of House Bill 265?
House Bill 265 by Representative Knight of the 130th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 48 of the OCGA relating to revenue and taxation so as to revise the terms Internal Revenue Code and Internal Revenue Code of 1986 and thereby incorporate certain provisions of the federal law into Georgia law. The Committee of the Senate on Finance recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Huffsettler of the 52nd. This completes the order, Mr. President.
The Rules Chairman's already got his button pushed for a question. That's not a good sign. Chair recognizes the freshman senator from the 4th to present House Bill 265. House Bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to be here today, and it's an honor to present this to you. If you look on your desk, you've got the summary that was prepared by the Department of Revenue. So a long spreadsheet. I'm not going to bore you with that, but I will be happy at any point in time after the talk today to kind of go over that with you if you want to. I'm gonna kind of go back and do a little bit of history of this so we'll all know what it's about, because there is some significant dollars involved in it. This bill actually is House Bill 265, and it was passed in the House on February 9th, just a few days ago, 166 yes and 0 no. This bill was sponsored in the House by Representative David Knight, Representative Bruce Williamson, and Representative Shaw Blackman. All this bill came about as a result of the COVID and the changes in tax law in 2020. That was a result of all the COVID problems that we had. So time is of the essence on this bill, because we got a lot of people that can't file their tax returns, or either people that have already filed their tax returns that may have to amend them if we don't make the changes in conformity with what the House has suggested. So as we get it, hopefully we'll get it passed today, goes on to the governor to sign, then everybody can prepare their tax returns as they want to. As you know, I'm a numbers person, But I went back and did some homework on this bill, and I talked to the people that were involved in the bill, and not only involved in the bill from the House side, but also brought it over. Initially, I started talking with David Knight, who was the author of the bill. I also talked to Shaw Blackman, who is chairman of Ways and Means Committee in the House. I called David Curry, who is the commissioner of the Department of Revenue, and he referred me to John Foster, who's a CPA with the Department of Revenue, and I talked to John about the bill. I was very fortunate. I went on and talked to Melanie DeBussy, who is our Senate Budget and Evaluation Director, and Melanie also talked to the Dr. Dorfman, who is the Governor Kemp's economist. I also reached out to my own colleagues, Georgia Society of CPAs, and reviewed it with them. And of course, all of these people assured me that what's in the bill is in conformity with what needs to be in the bill, and they're happy with it. Let me give you a little bit of history of how the bill came about. During 2020, as you well remember, that's the period of time that really was very stressful in all of our lives. In March of that year, March 16th, President Trump signed the first tax bill, and it was called Families First Coronavirus Response Act. The big thing about that act, if you recall, was they extended the deadline for filing tax returns from April 15th to July 15th, because we all thought the coronavirus was going to be around just for a few days, and we all going to be over it and go on. But it also, in that act, also provided some money for people if people stayed at home because they had the coronavirus or if they were taking care of family members. Shortly thereafter that, on March the 17th, the next tax act was filed, and it was called the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. Many of you know that as called the CARES Act. We hear the word CARES all the time and refer to that act. That act was signed March 27, 2020. The big things that came out of that act, many of y'all that are all of us that are in business know that something called the Paycheck Protection Program. And what that did, that enabled a lot of our businesses to stay open. And it was initially it was based upon so many months of salary they had and that type of thing, but it was extremely helpful for businesses. The big question at that time on that bill, on that particular situation, was whether it basically was a grant from the federal government to the businesses, and the big question was whether it's going to be taxable to the businesses. Of course, the Internal Revenue Service at that time wanted to make it taxable, and so we went back and forth about that. And then also, as a part of that, there was some credits that came about, some rebates to people. I think it was $1,200 per person and $500 per family member. So the Payroll Protection Program, as we well know, was a big part of that act. And then the big act that really kind of slowed things down, the big act that really slowed things down was the act that was signed by the President on December 27, 2020, and it was called the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. And the big thing, several things with that, but the biggest thing in that situation was that it cleared up whether the payroll protection money was going to be taxable or non-taxable. And not only did it clear up whether it's going to be taxable or non-taxable, it also cleared up whether we could still deduct the expenses in relation to that. So many of y'all have had clients and people have asked you about that, and I'm here to tell you that the act is very clear, and that you do not have to pay taxes on the money, and you can also deduct the expenses. So it's a very good thing for all of us. But the big thing about all this was not true until the Georgia State Senate and the House and the governor signed the bill that makes all this come about. So that's the reason we're here today. Let me tell you just a few highlights. You've got the highlights of the bill here that was actually prepared by the Department of Revenue, but I'm going to just throw out a few things to you, and some of them I've already covered. One of the things is it allows a contribution deduction of $300 for everybody, $600 per couple. Unlimited amount of contributions can be made to charities for last year. In a help to try to get the restaurant industry kind of picked up a good bit, it went in and allowed business meals to go from 50% deductibility to 100% deductibility. And that I think that's going to be a significant benefit for the restaurant industry. Again, as I stated earlier, PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, was forgiven. And also there's another series of rebates coming for people under a certain income level. the next round of the PPP is already being looked at, and it will go out. Many of our clients have already started. Some of them qualify for it, and some of them do not. But in the last tax act in December, they also said that those dollars would not be taxable, and the expenses would be deductible. So to sum all that up is that there you go. I'm doing a little bit of filibustering here too. To sum all that up, we need your vote to amend the Georgia tax code to be applicable with the provisions of the 1986 Internal Revenue Service Code as recommended by the House of Representatives and the House Ways and Means Committee. Thank you. Mr. President.
Do you yield for questions?
I do.
The chair is shocked that it took you 48 minutes longer than the senator from the 8th to present his first bill. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. That kind of leads into, it's a parliamentary inquiry. Since he filibustered for the entire 30 minutes on this complex issue.
State your inquiry.
Can we extend the time so we can actually ask him a question? Never mind,
You better hurry. Chair recognizes the distinguished rules chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I do.
Did you learn your timing orator skills from the senator from the 8th?
No, sir, I didn't.
I already used that joke.
Well, I know. That's why I threw it in there anyway. Senator.
Yes, sir.
You are senator.
Yes, sir.
Did you run for the state senate?
Yes, sir.
Well, why is your first bill a House bill? Can you tell us that? I don't wait for the translation. Give it to me now.
The answer is that I normally am very careful about what I do.
Yeah.
I'm very careful about what I do, and so I've been really sitting back and watching the other leaders in the Senate until this came about.
You didn't watch long. Senator Yield?
Yeah, I do.
This bill only changed the date. Is that correct?
Only changes what?
The date.
The date.
D-A-T-E, date. It only changes the date of when.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that?
Correct.
Well.
Somebody help the senator over there, the rules chairman. He's choking on something.
Senator, if this only changed the date, what were you talking about? I yield.
Do you continue to yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 13th for a question.
Will the senator yield?
I do. Thank you.
Senator, I tried to follow you, and I'm going to kind of follow up on what the senator from the 53rd saying. I mean, since you were kind of speaking in tongues, do you mind repeating all that again so we can understand it?
Senator, I'd be happy to discuss that with you after the session.
Thank you, sir.
Do you continue to yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes the majority whip for a serious question.
Senator, will you yield?
I do.
How is it that a freshman, you are a freshman, correct? First year in the Senate.
Yes, sir.
You come in here in less than 2 months, you present a 3-page bill, as the senator from the 53rd has pointed out, that only has a bunch of date changes in it. But it has a $250 million tax cut. That is impressive for a freshman. How did you learn this so fast down here?
I've done this type of work for 40 years.
Well, you are very good at this. I commend you for your work. Thank you for that tax cut for Georgia taxpayers.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the distinguished, hardworking lawyer from Macon, the senator from the 18th, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I do, sir.
I wasn't going to ask this until the distinguished whip asked it, but given your answer of your work that has produced a $250 million tax cut, and you are a CPA, correct, Senator?
Yes, sir, I am.
Would you mind sharing your telephone number with us for your firm so we could get some of that benefit as well?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. We'll do that later. But
I'd
no,
recommend
the only
doing that
serious
offline.
question, Senator, is I noticed our distinguished senator from Savannah, the senator from the 1st, and his speaking about changing of and daylight savings times, and he talked about the circadian rhythm several times. And I wonder, do you see the connection between circadian rhythms and us talking about this bill today in your presentation?
I don't think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I didn't think so, Senator. And with that, that'll be all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, this is not a rhetorical question. You get to answer this. Do you continue to yield?
I do continue to yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from Athens for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield?
I do, sir.
Well, now I'm disturbed. As an accountant, you understand the one left-hand side's the credits and the right-hand side's the debits and all that type of stuff, right?
I do.
And I hope you were paying attention during our debate over a balanced budget amendment the other day.
I did.
You do recognize we have a constitutional obligation in Georgia to have a balanced budget.
Correct, sir.
All right, so your $250 million tax cut, have you discussed that with the governor, that he needs to reduce his revenue estimate by $250 million?
I have discussed it with the appropriate people I mentioned in my introduction. I have, but not with
Is
the
our
governor.
appropriations chairman prepared to make, $250 million in cuts to education and health care wherever necessary?
Well,
I'll
I'll
let you
clear this up.
contemplate on that for just a little bit here before you ask for our vote. Thank you.
Interesting question. The chair recognizes the appropriations chairman for a question.
Thank you, Senator. Do you yield?
I do, sir.
Senator, don't you have a little project down in Statesboro that's really important to your district this year?
Yes, sir.
Do you think that passing this bill will put that project in jeopardy at all?
I would like to think that the senator could find ways to fund that.
Senator, do you yield for another question?
I do, sir.
During this time, thank you for your rousing presentation of this 3-page, 4-change bill. I noticed it took quite a amount of time. I was just wondering if your accounting firm bills by the hour.
We do.
You're pretty good at it.
We're pretty
Senator, you have more questions now than when you started. Do you continue to yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th for a question.
Oh, Lord.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I do, sir.
Senator, when you were name dropping earlier, and I think you went through the entire legislature and every constitutional officer, are you aware that one of those constitutional officers, the commissioner of the Department of Revenue, actually gave me a phone call, and he was under the impression you were a representative. Are you aware of that?
No, sir, I was not.
Well, I want to follow up with the good senator from the 53rd. Are you confused? Because when a constitutional officer thinks that you're a representative, because I guess you're carrying a House bill for your first bill, are you not aware of the issue there?
I didn't realize he was didn't understand. I thought I told him I was a senator.
You may want to clear that up there, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your advice.
We still have 4 bills to pass or take up.
Yeah, Senator yields.
It's your choice. Your choice.
Thank y'all.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against House Bill 265 if we haven't debated it enough yet? The chair sees none. Is there objection or agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none and the main question is ordered. The questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Senator from the 7th doesn't know it yet, but now he does. Have all senators voted? Hallways clear? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Congratulations. Next steps to pass the Senate bill. That's Chapter 2. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 89.
Senate Bill 89 by Senator Miller of the 49th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally so as to provide for a chief elections assistant officer, provide for the qualifications, appointment, supervision, and duties of such officer, to provide for election assistant coaches, to provide for the qualifications and duties of such coaches. The Senate Committee on Ethics recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Burns of the 23rd. The Senate Ethics Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 89, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally so as to provide for a chief elections assistant officer, to provide for the qualifications, appointment, supervision, and duties of such officer, to provide for election assistants, coaches, to provide for the qualifications and duties of such coaches, to provide for the identification of low-performing county election superintendents. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the pro tem to speak to Senate Bill 89.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I bring before you Senate Bill 89, and this is the Elections Assistance Officer, and it's a new position created as an election assistance officer employed by the Secretary of State under the supervision of the Director of Elections. This is appointed by the State Election Board, and as I'm sure you're all well aware of who serves on that board, and it is a bipartisan board. The individual that would be appointed to this position would have a minimum of 5 years of experience in county elections as a superintendent or election supervisor. He would oversee, or he or she would oversee the system that supports county election superintendents, coordinate training, provide a list of third-party specialists, consultants to conduct on-site evaluations, work with the Secretary of State's elections divisions to identify state resources to support the lowest performing election superintendents, and identify and recruit individuals that could serve as coaches to assist the Secretary of State. The criteria for this assistant would be previous election law experience, elector inconvenience. The items that would be under question would be previous election law violations, elector inconvenience in voting, low-performing systems, failure to adhere to election laws, and provide overall best practices and support to the county election system. I stand for any questions, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th for a question.
Will the senator yield?
Certainly.
I just have one question, actually. I'll direct your attention to line 76.
Yes, ma'am.
It says pursuant to paragraph 2 of subsection C of Code Section 21282. Can you show me where that is?
I cannot, but I'm sure you can show me. I cannot at this moment. I do not have it in front of me.
Well, actually you do, and but I can't find it either.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Will the senator yield?
Certainly.
This bill purports to create more code sections within Title 21, correct?
Correct.
One of those code sections would be OCGA 21282, and that's line 59, correct?
That is correct.
On line 76, you reference paragraph 2 of subsection C of Code Section 21282. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I don't see a paragraph 2 of subsection C of Code Section 21282.
There may be a Scrivener's error, and I'm sure you know of what you speak. And this reminds me of a circumstance a week or so ago where we didn't have a subsection, we didn't have a paragraph, or it was erroneously labeled. But there may be a Scrivener's error here.
And with respect to that, will the senator yield?
Certainly.
And so because this bill is engrossed and it references a non-existent provision, then there's nothing that we can do about it with respect to an amendment.
At this moment, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 10th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator yield?
Certainly.
Senator, thank you for bringing this bill, and I do understand there may be cases where the Secretary of State may have to exercise the broad powers that they already have. My question deals with over on line 90. It says, basically, such person shall exercise such powers and duties for such period of time as the state election officers, state election board shall direct.
That's correct.
I had wanted to introduce an amendment so that that time could be limited. Is there a possibility, since this bill is engrossed, to consider some kind of revision so that these election boards know that a person will not be in their office forever?
I would be happy to, if your proposal is for this time period to extend through the next election, I would be more than willing to entertain that discussion as this bill goes over to the House and possibly amend it to your satisfaction.
Perfect. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 1st for a question.
Does Senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that, though it may be engrossed here on the floor today, that you are certainly willing to make any corrections relating to a Scrivener's error or time change as the time goes forward?
Thank you, Senator, for that clarification.
Do you continue to yield?
Certainly.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Certainly.
Senator, can you explain to me your understanding of who the county election superintendent is?
Our county election superintendent in my particular county, yes, I know exactly who she is, and I know how she handles her duties and her responsibilities. Now, in different counties, I'm sure there are different responsibilities.
My understanding is that the county election superintendent is the elections board, not the administrator.
This bill is drafted to reflect the wishes of the board portrayed and enacted by that individual.
But Senator, isn't it true that under your bill, anyone be entering, working with the assistance of this new position and any other ramifications to follow is actually the elections board of that county, not the individual they've hired to run the elections?
I'm not sure I understand your question, if that is a question.
Yes, we are taking over the board, not the administrator.
Not the administrator, the board. That's correct.
That's what I was trying to
Yes,
find
ma'am.
out. If that was
Thank
your, okay, yes, and then if you'll yield for a couple more questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So isn't it true that right now there are options that are in code and available to all persons, including the Secretary of State and the elections board, to deal with low-performing or, quote-unquote, low-performing elections processes in states?
I think that's your statement is correct, but they're self-governing. There's no oversight. There's no implementation. So what we're doing currently is we're asking a low-performing board to discipline themselves, a low-performing jurisdiction to discipline or to correct himself. And if we're not giving them any correction, any direction, any best practices, how can we expect them to improve without any coaching? We heard this very body yesterday on numerous occasions say that these individuals need assistance. These individuals need help. These individuals are overwhelmed. In my particular county, I know that in 2016, we had 6,000 absentee ballot requests. In 2020, we had 28,000 absentee ballot requests. So what we're doing is we're asking these people to do a better job with less resources. This is going to give the resources, going to give the opportunity, going to give coaching and best practices, going to give direction and guidance for individuals who are interested in improving the performance of the county. I hope that helps.
That does. Do we yield for 2 more questions?
Certainly.
Thank you very much, Senator. So it's my understanding under this legislation that in my county, the members of the elections board are appointed or suggested and then confirmed by the county parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and then we have an individual appointed by a judge. So here we would have the state elections board suspend and remove all of those individuals and put into place individuals that they would pick. Is that correct?
If I could direct your attention to line 78, it would say within 90 days following a comprehensive on-site evaluation of management practices and procedures, a county election superintendent fails or refuses to implement recommended correction actions, then some corrective actions could be taken.
Well, right, I understand
so it's not
that,
just
Senator.
swooping in and,
Well, I know.
taking control.
I thank you very much. I've read the whole bill. I understand that. I'm asking about when that action is actually taken. The question is, right now we have a process, at least in my county, that's the only one I can directly speak to right now, where we have 5 members, 2 have been appointed by the Democratic Party of DeKalb, 2 are appointed by the Republican Party of DeKalb, and then we have a judge who makes the 5th appointment. So in this instance, were corrective action to be taken under the bill in my county, we would, I believe, have all of those individuals removed, and we would have the state elections board appoint the people who would run
That's
the
correct.
elections in DeKalb.
Yes, ma'am.
So how is it fair in your mind? Right now, we have a system where it's balanced between the parties, and then we have a judge. Under your bill, the state elections board, which really is just the way it is in statute, it's very heavily weighted. In the current instance, Republican would appoint everybody. So there would be no equity or comity between the parties anymore, at least in my county.
The setup of that state elections board has been in place for many years, and I don't know the origin or the year that it was created, but I would make the gross assumption that it has been that way for more than a decade.
That may well be true, but isn't it true that my point remains that?
Your point.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I'm sure you know of what you speak.
Yes, and then the last question, Senator, and thank you for your patience and indulgence. I do appreciate it, I really do. I believe that in the legislation, the state elections board would develop rules for generating the low-performing criteria. And my question is, and it kind of goes to the last question, wouldn't you agree that it's a far different task to run an election in a very large county than it is in a much smaller county? And isn't there a significant risk of sort of a partisan bias given the makeup of the state elections board and the fact that elections administration are just a different thing in a very large county than it is in a smaller county? How are we safeguarding against that?
I would say that there are vast contrasts in not only the resources, but the abilities of the individuals from county to county. We have counties that struggle to provide public safety, can't afford hospitals, can't support their schools, struggle to do those kind of things. And then we have counties that have enormous resources. And both of those counties may need helping and may need coaching. For instance, we have counties of less than 1 million people, and they can't conduct an election and complete an election before the entire state of Florida completes an election, and the state of Florida has 20 million people. And we can't count less than 1 million votes in some of our larger counties. So I think that there's action and assistance needed across the board. This is not intended to or designed to point out or attack any particular party or organization or county. It's to assist all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator, do you continue to yield?
I will yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
Certainly.
Senator, is it not true that yesterday we heard testimony that a lot of our local boards and our local registrars were already having lack of funding, lack of resources?
That's correct.
And is it not true that this would help assist them in those times?
Absolutely. The gentleman knows of what he speaks.
Thank you.
Mr. President, no further questions. I'll yield the well.
You have more questions.
Let's give it another minute or two. Go ahead.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 40th for a question.
Thank you.
Does the gentleman yield?
Certainly.
Are you aware that the Georgia Secretary of State's office already enjoys a much larger role in overseeing and controlling elections across the state than most other states do? For instance, we provide the same voting machines statewide to every local election office, and that most other states, those local election offices, make their own decisions about how people in that community vote?
I'm well aware of that, Senator, and I'm also aware that the individual or individuals that are tasked with supporting those elections officers have advice and guidance, and they have no further authority or no further responsibility. They conduct training, and I have talked with the Secretary of State's office about this bill, and they did not express any concern whatsoever.
Do you further yield?
Certainly.
So that is a large role for the Secretary of State compared to other states. Given that a few years ago, a large number of voting precincts were closed, which when you analyze the data, indicated that these precincts that were closed were predominantly affecting communities of people, black people. How can you assure the people of Georgia that this new increased power of the Secretary of State's office won't become overwhelmingly partisan, especially given a composition of a board that is 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat?
Senator, thank you for the question. I would point out to you the media statements and statements from others indicating that the Secretary of State ran an impeccable election, and for all those responsibilities that he had, I think there have been very few criticism of the Secretary of State in particular.
But this is the board, right?
And I think that the counties that have been conducting those elections do not enjoy that same reputation and do not enjoy those same accolades. So I think that there's a contrast there in what you're expressing. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you.
Do you continue to yield?
If I must.
Your choice.
I want to be a good sport.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 56th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Certainly. Thank you, sir.
Senator, you brought up a county that I happen to represent a good majority of that has had problems in elections. Isn't it true that Fulton County, Georgia, has had a problem in elections for decades?
The senator knows of what he speaks.
Senator, isn't it further true that the state has come down on Fulton County numerous times in order to get them to correct that, yet we still see systemic problems?
The senator is well informed on this topic.
And Senator, isn't it also true that the Fulton County Election Board, the bipartisan board, has twice tried to remove the elections administrator from that position because of the continued failures? And what you're doing today is trying to finally remedy and provide the resources to help those counties out.
That's absolutely correct, Senator. Thank you very much for that line of questioning.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 41st for a question.
Senator, do you yield?
Certainly.
How much is this going to cost, this new position?
Well, we don't have a fiscal note attached to this at the moment, and we are working through that, but this will be have a period of time to evaluate that and make sure that we have the resources available.
So do you further yield?
Certainly.
Are we able to pass unfunded mandates? As a body?
This would be necessarily, I don't know if you want to characterize it as an unfunded mandate. Most of the bills we pass do not have a fiscal note attached, and we all know there are responsibilities and expenses associated with almost all of those bills.
All right, thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 12th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator in the well yield for a question, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it not true that the scarcities of election resources in the past did not present a problem until the election year of 2020?
I'm sure the senator knows of what she speaks.
Thank you.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll yield the will, and I'd ask for your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 89.
Chair recognizes the minority whip to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll try to be brief, but as we already see, there's some issues with this particular piece of legislation, and that's basically the point that I'll be making also, that we probably just need to take a pause right now in this legislation, because there's a lot of areas that need to be clarified and qualified, and so we can understand exactly what we're actually going to be doing here. So this new office has investigative powers. This new office that we're basically creating, and make no mistake, it's basically an office. It's not going to just be one person. We're giving them investigative powers. But that would almost assume that that does not exist today. The fact of the matter is the Georgia Election Board already has these type of investigative powers that exist, and they do it, and they do a good job at it. One of the catch-alls is number 8 within their rules, says that they can employ such assistance as necessary, which basically means that they can already employ persons like what we're actually providing for today if they believe it was necessary. Number 6 says that they actually should make recommendations to the General Assembly for changes that they deem to be advisable. So once again, if the board was believing that some of these changes were advisable, it is actually in their purview today to make those changes or make those recommendations to this body. The bill also would assume that the Secretary of State does not have certain powers and abilities. And what we're going to find is that there's actually basically a cross-pollination between the Secretary of State and the Board of Elections, and that we're actually creating this new office to go on top of all of that. One of the issues in this bill is training. And it talks about training your elected officials, as if that training does not already exist. We see that on lines 37 through 38, where it talks about overseeing a system of supports and assistance for county elections supervisors, including coordinating training for such offices. But that already exists. Training is mandatory for those offices under OCGA 21-2-101. It is mandatory for your absentee ballot clerks, chief registrars, election superintendents, and Board of Election designees. It is offered on multiple occasions. Now, that training may just be one instance of training, but the fact of the matter is the election board under 21-2-101C can recommend further training for your election boards. So therefore, the metric already exists to conduct further training. The metric already exists to continue different training opportunities. Why create a whole nother office to do what already exists today? The better route may be just to amend 21-2-101 and allow for additional mandatory training. The template is already there, because if the election board finds that a superintendent basically needs more training, they already are empowered to do that. So if we believe that more training is necessary, we already have the ability to do that. Also, it talks about, when we had this in committee, this idea about training came up. And then it was said, well, actually what we mean by training is training of poll workers. But we also have that also. The state of Georgia gives poll workers a 103-page manual worth of training. It's kind of complicated, but they're trained on that. There are actually 20 videos that your poll workers actually are mandated to watch before they can do their job. Now, what's missing in those videos is actually teaching. There's no teaching involved. There's no teaching necessarily involved as far as the manual is concerned. So what the better route would be, instead of outsourcing to this whole new office, may be to just employ or use what may be like adjunct professors to teach this 103-page manual and to teach these particular videos that exist. That is much better than doing an office that at this point in time probably is looking at between $300,000 to $400,000 a year. Line 39 talks about getting, in this bill, line 39 says that we're going to hire third-party specialists, auditors and consultants to assist county supervisors. But this also already exists because we have what are called local election officer liaisons in the Georgia Secretary of State's office. Where do they fit within this third-party specialists, consultants, and auditors? We also have in this particular bill an idea about identifying best practices. We also have in this bill, as far as trying to identify best practices, as though there's hard to find best practices. We could, number one, Georgia's already looked at trying to do best practices when we created the Election Advisory Council in 2012 under our current governor. Secondly, we can look at the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, which gives all states and localities best practices. So the idea that we have to identify best practices is a misnomer. It already exists. Also, best practices and training is found in the National Association of Elected Officials, which gives certified programs for poll workers, for election supervisors, for Secretary of States, and others. So the best practices also exist. But the more troubling issue here is one that I think this bill is trying to get to. So what I'm trying to point out is that this already, many of these different layers already exist. But what this bill really is trying to get to is removing election superintendents. And what we have in our mind when we have this language on line 60, and the language says, by rule and regulation, develop criteria to identify low-performing county election superintendents based upon previous or existing election law violations, elector inconvenience in voting due to lack of poor administration of election or departure of best practices. What does that mean? What does election law violations mean? It is not criminal law violations. They're election law violations. It's not necessarily what you believe that it means. Go to the Georgia Secretary of State's office and look online, and you will see the following counties have been cited for election law violations, among many: Peach County, Long County, Pickens County, Douglas County, Hancock County, Fayette County, Troup County, and Liberty County. All of them have been cited for election law violations. So therefore, in 2022, because they have previous instances of election law violations, would they be subject to having their election board removed? Go to September the 10th, and you will find actual 5 hours worth of hearings dealing with election law violations. Go to September 10th, and you will find at hour 4:48, Hall County poll workers experienced an issue. In Hall County, there was a poll worker that brought her cell phone into the polling place. The voters, basically an argument ensued. The voters in Hall County, according to the testimony, experienced emotional distress and fear for their safety. Would that not be voter inconvenience? Would that not be poor administration? Would that not mean that Hall County, then, if a similar instance took place, that Hall County would be subject to having their election board basically removed? Is that not voter inconvenience? I'll also point you to Putnam County. Unfortunately, I don't have the time for Putnam County, but in Putnam County, something similar happened. In Putnam County, it was determined that a voter attempted to vote twice. The election supervisor and the voter were both referred to the Attorney General office. The voter was referred to the District Attorney's office. That was an election law violation. That would be a previous violation that exists for Putnam County. If something like that happened again in 2022, Putnam County could be subject to having their election board removed. Fayette County, in the hour 3:43 on September the 10th, they had a problem with redistricting. They were determined to have a redistricting issue. It was an election law violation. It was also a voter inconvenience. It was referred to the Attorney General's office. Testimony was that Fayette County had redistricted pursuant to a court order. It was complicated, and they were asking basically to be given a mulligan, so to speak. It was bound over. Fayette County had an election law violation. It is in violation. That is a previous violation. Therefore, in 2022 or later, if it's found that Fayette County has a violation, its Board of Elections could be subject to removal. But Bryan County, at the 4-hour mark, a person had moved, and a person with a similar name actually was given their voter card to vote. The voter was given the wrong voter card. That went to the election board. It was bound over. It was an election law violation. So Bryan County now has a previous election law violation. Could this happen again? Absolutely. The superintendent in her testimony said it was human error, but they also said they gave her a strongly worded reprimand, and the main reason why it was only a reprimand was because they could not hear her and she couldn't properly defend herself. But it was an election law violation. Bryan County would be subject to have their election board removed. Habersham County, at the 4-hour and 6-minute mark, bound over to the Attorney General's office. An absentee ballot was not sent because of clerical error. Just one absentee ballot. It was bound over. The person was never able to vote. That would be an inconvenience to the voter. That would be an election law violation. So the Habersham County, if they had any other violations, could be subject to these provisions. Stewart County, they had 18 electors that voted improperly because of redistricting. Stewart County had an election law violation. It was bound over to the Attorney General's office. Athens Clark had 2 violations that had to be heard on the same day. At the 2-hour and 52-minute mark, they had a violation where they received a letter of instruction. They failed to give a UCOVA ballot. UCOVA is a violation of Uniform Overseas Citizen Absentee Voting Act. They failed to give one citizen their ballot. They received a violation, a letter of instruction, but it was a violation. Athens Clark came back same day, also received a letter of instruction because one absentee ballot was never received by a voter. Those are election law violations, which means that all of these boards could be subject immediately to having their board removed. Now, that's not what you anticipated. That's not what persons thought. What you're thinking is, no, we mean where it's 2,000 absentee ballots that were sent out and they were all messed up and it was signature match. But that's not what the board calls an election law violation. The board doesn't call that an election law violation. They say one vote, one absentee voter doesn't get their ballot, it's bound over to the Attorney General's office. That's an election law violation. And I just named you all of those particular counties. It's not Fulton County. It's not DeKalb County. Those are smaller counties that right now have election law violations that this bill would basically possibly remove their superintendents. And let me also say this, these violations are not in 2020. These violations were in 2016, some in 2018, which means the Secretary of State is just getting to these violations. If there's any other subsequent violations, this bill actually may remove those election superintendents in those particular counties. They have election law violations. They have voter inconvenience violations. And if you want to make the point that, well, no, that's not what we're talking about. We want it to be big. Every election law violation is big. And the board takes these things very seriously. Where you heard persons getting bound over to the Attorney General's office, it wasn't thousands of votes. It wasn't hundreds of votes. It literally was one vote. One person didn't receive a ballot. And even though persons came to testify and they said it was human error, we've self-corrected, some even self-reported, the board said we're bounding it over to the Attorney General's office. And they have to do that. Why? Because every vote counts. My seatmate, she won her race, senator from the 43rd, by 8 votes. So the election board takes this stuff extremely seriously. So in your mind, it's thousands of votes. That's an election law violation. And your mind of voter inconvenience is persons are outside sitting for hours. But in the election board's mind, a voter inconvenience is the fact that somebody brought a cell phone into a polling place, got into an argument, and voters said they were afraid for their life. That's an election inconvenience. And the fact of the matter is, quite frankly, when you hear these tapes and you listen to it, a couple of things you find. is that no amount of training may actually be able to substitute for human error. It's there. The other thing you find is these persons aren't doing this stuff on purpose. All of them are contrite. All of them are self-corrected. All of them, some even self-reported. But they were found to have an election law violation. They're facing the Attorney General by the board. That's how strict the board is. And you want the board to be that strict. But if they're going to be that strict, and some of these counties already have these issues, and they haven't started looking at 2018, they haven't even looked at 2020, and some of these counties get issues in those years, it's a strong possibility, if you want this statute to be what you really want it to be, they're going to be losing their election boards. And with that, Mr. President, I'm taking any questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 9th for a question.
Does the senator yield?
Yes.
So the Constitution right now already grants equal protection clause that really already grants that power of wide uniformity to conduct elections. That power is already granted to our Secretary of State. Is that not correct?
Yes. And has the power actually to remove, but yes, continue.
And that power does apply across our 159 counties.
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Either will.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th to speak to Senate Bill 89.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I think it's important that we establish exactly what a superintendent is under Georgia law. Our election system is county-based and pursuant to OCGA 21-2-70. Superintendents are one of two people or things. One is boards, election boards, right? The other is probate judges. So out of 159 counties, approximately 30 of our counties have probate judges serve as election superintendents. Then the balance of that, approximately 129, actually have election boards. So I think that's kind of important to kind of set the table a little bit. Because I want to tell you what this bill really does. It gives the Secretary of State Raffensperger, who is chair of the state election board, and members of the state election board, gives them the power to pick a new assistance officer, a czar, if you will, who will then make a list of low-performing counties, and then the Secretary of State and the state election board can basically suspend the people on the board and take over these boards in any of the counties that actually have one. So not only is this unnecessary, but it's a violation of the non-delegation doctrine. It violates the Georgia Constitution. Well, how? Well, let's think about it. How are boards of election in each of these counties constituted? By local legislation. By legislation many of us have filed and passed in this body. So effectively, we are giving the Secretary of State, Secretary Raffensperger, and the board our power regarding boards of election in each of the counties we represent to take over these boards and replace them effectively. And what's interesting with respect to the language is it seems that they can do it for as long as they want. And by installing their own pick, but this is the kicker, and if you look at lines 91 and 92, so the Secretary of State and the State Election Board, they can pick somebody to come in and take over these boards in any of the counties in this state. Not only the boards, but can kick out the probate judge, right? And say, we don't think that you're performing at the level that you need to perform. But then the kicker is that then the county has to pay for it. So you're going to send some person from Atlanta down in South Georgia, and say, sorry, y'all ain't doing what you need to do. Oh yeah, and county, we want you to pick up the bill for this guy. I understand the intent behind this, but with respect to elections violations, or if boards are not complying with the law and the like, the law is pretty strong as it is. OCGA 21-2-32 already allows the Secretary of State and the State Election Board to compel compliance with election law and regulations by going to court. They can get a judge to make them do it. Look, I understand all of us want to do what we can do to make the process better and to make people feel better about elections. But giving our power away to the Secretary of State and the State Election Board, power over our local people, people that we've actually put in those positions, that ain't the way to do it. I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the pro tem to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank my colleagues for their passion and for their determination and for their intellect. I appreciate it very much. What I'd like to do is correct this Scrivener's error on page 4, line 77. The section it's actually referring to is 21-2-80, and we will correct that across the hall when this bill goes over to the House, assuming I get a favorable consideration from this body, and I'll be happy to take the senator from the 10th's comments into consideration and work very hard to get that in the bill as well. Thank you very much. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Debate is closed. The question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agree to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Always clear. Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 35, the nays are 18. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. For what purpose does the senator from the 4th rise?
Mr. President, I move that House Bill 265 be immediately transmitted to the House.
Mr. Secretary, please read the caption.
House Bill 265 by Representative Knight of the 130th, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 48 of the OCGA relating to revenue and taxation so as to revise the terms Internal Revenue Code and Internal Revenue Code of 1986. This completes the order, Mr. President.
You passed your first bill and you think you can send it straight to the governor's desk.
Thank you, sir.
All right. The senator from the 4th has moved that House Bill 265 be immediately transmitted to the House. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and it will be immediately transmitted. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 157?
Senate Bill 157 by Senator Cowsert of the 46th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 15 of Chapter 1 of Title 10 of the OCGA relating to Fair Business Practices Act of 1975 so as to prohibit the deceptive practice of musical performance groups advertising and appearing as a recording group without the recording group's permission or denoting that it is a salute and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Agriculture and Consumer Affairs recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Walker of the 20th. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from Athens to present Senate Bill 157.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, this bill may seem familiar. We passed it last year. I believe it was a unanimous vote, and it got hung up in the pandemic and didn't get considered when we came back in after our break in the session. It amends the Fair Business Practices Act to include activities by performing group where they are appropriating the name and music of a real recording group. These are usually bands that tour around and go by the TAMs or Drifters or other oldies groups, and they represent themselves to be the actual recording act when in fact they are not, and don't have permission of the original recording group to be promoting their music, playing their music for profit. Makes that an unfair business practice and allows remedies such as injunctions and suits for damages if that's done. There's exceptions if there's at least one member of the original recording artist that is also in the performing group, if they have permission of them, or if it's just a tribute band where they clearly identify we are not the Beatles, but we are playing music of the Beatles, something along those lines. So we would ask for your favorable consideration of this legislation. Mr. President, I'll yield the well unless there are questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 157? The chair sees none. Is there objection or agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none and the main question is ordered. The questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 148.
Senate Bill 148 by Senator Huffsettler of the 52nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 28 of the OCGA relating to General Assembly so as to create the 2021 Special Counsel on Tax Reform and Fairness for Georgians and the Special Joint Committee on Revenue Structure. The Senate Committee on Finance recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Huffsettler of the 52nd. The Senate Finance Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 148, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 28 of the OCGA relating to the General Assembly so as to create the 2021 Special Counsel on Tax Reform and Fairness for Georgians and the Special Joint Committee on Georgia Revenue Structure to state legislative findings and intent. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from Rome to present Senate Bill 148.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm here as Chair of the Finance Committee to present a bill to have a long-term study, and I want to give a little bit of history on it. Not back with the Chairman of the Rules the other day, we talked about Mesopotamia and the Neolithic 10,000 years ago, just the last 10 or 15 years in Georgia here. As I always say, I don't really have any great ideas of my own, but I find other things that work and try to do what works. They really appreciate that in the operating room too, that I'm not experimenting, but doing proven practices. And Georgia did something that worked really well back in 2010. It was sort of a transition period between Governor Perdue and Governor Deal, but they set up a committee that said, we're going to look at what would make Georgia economically competitive for the next decade and beyond. At the time, Georgia was number 6 in business, states to do business in by site selection. I think they were about 25th in business friendly. Number 10 is income tax as a percent of GDP. And this commission was made up of economists, CPAs, governors, Chamber of Commerce heads, National Federation of Independent Business. The guy who chaired this back then was a man named A.D. Frazier. I wasn't that familiar with him. I know some people here maybe know him. Some people might know the name Billy Payne a little bit more. Those were the two guys that in 1996 chaired our Olympics and organized it. Billy was more the upfront guy. A.D. was a behind-the-scenes guy. I've heard he was a dynamic leader. I talked to a CPA that was on the committee, a Georgia Tech professor, different ones that were part of that. And they made quite a number of suggestions that I frankly wish had been done on an up or down vote as was the original intent. But while that didn't happen, many of the things such as the changing of how we tax automobiles, the energy used in manufacturing, the way we do transportation fuel taxes, the tax court was set up as a result of this, and it's time for us to do that again. It's been 11 years. We still need to do the things we're doing. We have bills from the minority party in here that want to do a tax credit at the bottom. We've got a similar thing from the new chair in Ways and Means that wants to have it a little bit more broadly based, that he says because of the revenue that's come in from Marketplace Facilitator, we can have a bigger deductible at the bottom. And we need to do that, continue those things, continue the studies on a year-by-year basis, but we need to have a big picture study with economics professors and CPAs and the governor, the chamber, and all those to do that. So this would attempt to replicate what we did 11 years ago. And this committee is the same setup with one exception. There were sort of 2 governors involved at the time. That because of the transition, this would only have the current governor involved, and it would also have a member that the minority leaders would appoint, a fiscal economics professor. I've also had requests from economic development to be in on it, from the Metro Chamber to be at the table, and what we did is in this bill is we have them on there, but as ex officio non-voting members, but have a seat at the table for input. Again, I hope this can be as successful if we can get this done as the last one 11 years ago. And Georgia needs to look at where we're going to be for the next decade. Are we going to stand still and let others pass us, or are we going to do as was done in 2010 and make us more economically competitive and make us the #1 state to do business? This is certainly a bipartisan bill. The President Pro Tem was my second signer, the minority leader, the third signer, majority leader, the fourth, and I think I had about 38 co-sponsors, and I apologize if I didn't get to you and give you an opportunity to co-sponsor this, because I think we all, in a bipartisan manner, want to be efficient in Georgia, be competitive, and make sure we get the best bang for our buck. With that, I'll yield the well if there's no questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you, and I appreciate all your support on this from everyone.
Any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption to Senate Bill 51 and the amendment? Amendment number 1.
Senate Bill 51 by Senator Thompson of the 14th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 14 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to other educational programs under the Quality Basic Education Act so as to authorize home study students in grades 6 through 12 to participate in extracurricular and interscholastic activities in the student's resident public school system. The Senate Committee on Education and Youth recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Payne of the 54th. Amendment 1 by Senator Thompson of the 14th and others, offering the following Amendment 1. Amend Senate Bill 51 on line 16 by replacing Mosley with the following, Mosley. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th to speak to Senate Bill 51 and Amendment number 1.
Morning, Senators. Each of us and the people we serve have a story. Some of these stories are great, some are more challenging. Today I plan to not only present an important piece of legislation that's been brought to this body previously by me, but unlike previous years, this year I come with bipartisan support as well as an incredible strong partner called the Georgia High School Association. I'd like to publicly thank Dr. Robin Hines for his organization, for his collaboration, as well as a compromise as we worked together on this great piece of legislation, and his public support is appreciated. I'll begin by providing a life story, or at least some context behind it, and let you know why it's personal to me. You see, each of us have the opportunity to work on legislative priorities that we deem important. Maybe it was important to a constituent, maybe a lobbyist, or maybe it was just personal. Today I bring before you Senate Bill 51, the Dexter-Mosley Act, that's a priority for all three of these groups, as well as 60,000 plus families that feel like they've been discriminated against. We can all agree that extracurricular activities are an important part of a child's development, teaching them to compete, interact, and focus. One huge aspect of interaction with others is the ability to cope. We learned this especially during COVID. You see, life has a way of dealing you a complicated mess, not only to the kids that don't have perfect home lives, but many others. And they need a way to deal with this for so many reasons. COVID only exacerbated the stress on homes with kids being isolated and unable to interact with others. Recently, I shared my personal story with a group of you that attended a Wednesday morning Bible study. It's the first time I allowed myself to be that vulnerable and share the depth of my story. In summary, had it not been for my high school wrestling coach and then my college wrestling coach intervening in my life and the outlet that sports provided me, I'm afraid to think where I would be. Unfortunately, I would have either been incarcerated or worse. But certainly, I would not be in this chamber taking up this cause. The legislation is called the Dexter-Mosley Act, and I'd like to share who Dexter Mosley really was. He was born in Xavier Dexter Mosley in Gadsden, Alabama area, where he grew to love playing sports before attending Auburn, Alabama, where he played college football. On the way to earning a degree, he earned the heart of his beautiful bride, Chanel. You could say he got a twofer. He got both. Dexter loved life and had a huge impact on so many as he coached and invested in a homeschool and club community. He was not only a role model, but served as a surrogate dad to so many. Although Dexter's heart was full of love, he began to experience health issues, and in 2016, he needed a heart transplant. In essence, he needed a new heart, a physical heart. Not to sit back or waste time, he jumped back into form managing multiple Waffle Houses and resumed rock climbing and coaching for the next 2 years. He was often referred to as a voice for the voiceless. But unfortunately, on January 16, 2019, at a young age of 51, Jesus decided his work on this earth was completed, and he called him home, leaving behind a widow and 6 children. Let's take a second to walk through this bill, and then I'll address the amendment that, frankly, we messed up and we misspelled Mosley. So to the widow that's out in the hall, I apologize for that, but we caught it, and this is the time to correct that. You've seen this bill many times over the years as we brought it through and successfully passed it over to the House, but this time's especially interesting. We got some collaborative effort and work from Georgia High School Association. Some of the things that we addressed in this current bill is that a student must take a qualifying course from the resident school. This is important because in the past, the public schools were concerned that there wouldn't be a collaboration. That's outlined in the bill. They must notify the school 30 days in advance of their intent to do this. The records, they're outlined in the bill. They have to meet all of the requirements as a regular student would. The big thing for me in the past was it's 6 months. We didn't want families or kids to game the system. In other words, we didn't want to leave public school to become homeschoolers only to game the system and come back for another sport. So we changed that to 12 months. Therefore, they wouldn't be able to leave and still be able to participate in another sport. It's laid out there for you. Ladies and gentlemen, in James 1:27, each and every one of us, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and fatherless is this: to look after the orphans and widows in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by this world. As we walk through and consider this legislation, it should be bipartisan. We should not be worried about whether or not this is a Republican bill or a Democratic bill. This is a bill that reaches out to many of our constituents in the state of Georgia. Not homeschoolers that chose because they were elite. There are many, many people that choose homeschooling because of other reasons. And we found during the COVID crisis, it's important to have these kids involved. Ladies and gentlemen, we all seen the SPCA commercials showing pitiful animals that have been forgotten as they peer into this camera. The commercials highlight just how lonely these dogs and cats must feel as they face their challenges alone. Think for a second. The scenario resembles some of these stories that I've heard. Hundreds and hundreds of stories from families, many of which would never vote for me because they vote Democrat or don't vote at all. But they wanted to share their story and their plight. This scenario resembles these, as I've heard from teenage boys and girls around the state that have aged out of clubs or opportunities to participate in extracurricular activities with their peers and friends that were studying in a local school. As you get ready to vote, don't consider whether it's a red button or a green button. Instead, think about Dexter's widow and the children and many others that may be out in the halls waiting right now for you to consider this. They don't want to face this issue alone as they beg for your help. In previous years, school systems were opposed. But an interesting thing has now transpired. Many of these same now see this as an opportunity for a public school to partner with homeschools, as these public schools highlight through a course that they're going to be paid for how good the school is. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got an amendment right here. This amendment simply fixes or corrects the spelling of Mosley. We caught it earlier in the process, but we thought correcting it on the floor would be the appropriate time to do that. Mr. President, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th with a question.
Senator Yale.
I will.
Senator, what do you consider a qualifying course if you're homeschooled and you want to go play football?
Qualified course will be spelled out in the statute.
Well, what I'm saying, what's a qualifying course? Is it social studies? Is it math?
Again, those will be qualified within the statute that's currently there. We're not going to establish what those qualified courses are. The school district would. It's already in there.
All right, so the schools agree with this bill?
Many of the schools have agreed with this bill. Yes, sir.
I'm saying the school systems that run the schools, they agree with this bill.
Again, many of the school systems do agree with this. Can I speak for all of them? No, sir.
What we're doing in this bill is saying that a kid who goes to homeschool can go to a public school to play football, basketball, or be in the band if he takes a qualifying course. But we're also saying that either he can go to that public school or he can go to a private school. Is that right?
So, Senator, we're not saying they can play public school. This is, again, they'd have to go through the same exact qualifications as someone that's actually in public school. What we're saying is we're creating equality. Something that this body fights day in and day out is about equality, and this provides equality for a homeschool family that has made the choice that's recognized in our state as an appropriate path for education. And this outlines a way for them to be able to have access to that school. That's all it does.
Well, would the senator further yield?
I will.
Are we saying that by state law, that kid who's homeschooled can go to either the public school that's in his district or the private school?
This bill right here is saying that if they're a home school, they would be able to, if the school is with a resident school where they would normally attend, right? Public school, they would normally attend. So for instance, Bartow County has a city school system, they've got a county school system. I live in a county. If I was going to participate in this bill passes, I would not be able to choose the Cartersville school system. I would have to attend my students, my children would have to choose Cass High. And what would happen is we would take a course from that school to then open up the qualification process. It does not guarantee that my daughter could play in the band or could participate in any of the extracurricular activities because it's not limited to sports. It says it's a qualifier to do that, and then they would compete just like anyone else would that is there full time.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. I appreciate your bipartisan support on this bill as we reach out and let the students know that we support them. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Although I respect the gentleman from the 14th, his opinion, and want to work and help schools, I urge caution on Senate Bill 51. Today we have many young boys and young girls wanting to be the next Michael Jordan, wanting to be the next LeBron James, wanting to be the next Cam Newton, want to do something in their lives who they think that they could be the next athlete, want a scholarship to college. And they think that high school is the way, high school athletics is the way to get there. But the truth of the matter is, for many of them, it does not happen because they lack academic skills to get there. They could be the best football player, the best basketball player, the best golfer, But because of academic skills, Georgia won't look at them. Because of academic skills, they'll never get to Georgia Tech. Because of academic skills, they'll never get to the Alabamas or the Ohio State. We need them in the classroom setting so that they can understand not only being an athlete, but also understanding how to be a scholar. Although the gentleman from the 14th is very eloquent, but we've seen this bill before. A couple of years ago, we called it the Tim Tebow bill. And a lot of us said, no, anything that Florida does, we don't want. But I think, and many of you also think, that coaches will take advantage of this situation. They could get a great-looking athlete at 14 to 13 years old, and they tell their parent, keep him in school, have him lift weights. We'll put him in a workout regimen for homeschool for 1 year, and then for the next 3 years, he just show up to school and play quarterback. Don't care, or just show up to school and be our point guard. Oh, he's 6'3" at 14 years old. Keep him home, let him lift weights, let him train, let him shoot baskets, ball, and he trained during the day. You take 1 or 2 classes, show up to basketball practice, and we go to the state championship. But what happens after that kid wins a state championship? What happens to that young black boy who gets a championship ring on his finger? He can't pass the SAT. He can't pass the ACT. He does not have the academic skills to take it to the next level. And I know you're going to say, well, some kids can go from high school to pros. Yes, they do. But maybe 0.1% can make that leap. We have to look out, not only to help those with academics, we need to look out and help those with only physical skills to become great athletes, but we got to ensure that these young men, these young girls have great academic skills. And the best way to do that is keep them in a public school or public charter school so they get the academic resources that's needed so that they only become an athlete but a scholar. Because when you go to Georgia Tech, we don't call them athletes. We call them scholar athletes. We got to put them in a position that they can succeed, not just on the football field, but in the classroom. And not all, and some people will benefit, but I feel some parents will have misguided information about their child's going to be the next great athlete. And I think some coaches will take advantage of this bill if it should become law and lead our children down a bad path. So I thank you to make caution of Senate Bill 51 when you vote. If there be no question, Mr. President, I yield away.
Chair recognizes the pro tem for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. Would you yield?
Yes, sir, I yield, Mr. Pro Tem.
I appreciate your passion for this issue, and wouldn't you agree, Senator, that one size doesn't fit all?
I would agree, sir.
Wouldn't you also agree, Senator, that an individualized education plan for each and every student is advantageous than putting them in a classroom or put them in a circumstance where they're having to adapt to the fast learners, the slow learners, what have you?
Well, Senator, I would tell you, though, that we need to look out for young men and young girls after their high school education. We need to prepare them not only to be athletes, but we need to prepare them to be scholars.
Would you further yield?
I would, sir.
Would you agree that from time to time, parents abdicate the responsibility of their education to the educational system and they should be managing that themselves?
I would also agree some parents are misguided by coaches and other admin and other people with outside influences. Yes, sir.
The gentleman knows of what he speaks, but isn't it ultimately the parent's responsibility to determine what's best for his child?
It is, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 29th to speak to the measure.
Colleagues, while I appreciate the hypotheticals offered by the senator from the 2nd, I wish to speak in realities. I wish to talk about Teresa, LaGrange College. Caroline, Columbus State University. Sarah Ann, Georgia Tech. Joe, Columbus State University. Jesse, Georgia State. And Ben, University of Georgia, getting ready to head that way. These are all homeschooled children who had no problem with the academics, none at all. The problem they had is most of them were athletes, and they were relegated to recreational sports in their community. Now understand this, their mother and father are very successful in their community. They paid their taxes on time. They own property, they own assets. They paid property taxes that went to the local school system. All that Ben asked for was to go play baseball because he was that good. He wasn't a recreational baseball player. He was an exceptional baseball player. But because his mother and father chose to give them the best education possible at home, not in the public schools where they didn't feel that their children would get the attention they needed nor the education they needed, they gave it to them at home. And the schools I named off accepted every one of them based on their scores, based on their discipline, based on their ability to get in the classroom in college and work hard. But they could not play sports, even though their father and mother, like all of us in this room, paid our taxes. We should not relegate these children and relegate these taxpayers to what the government says they have to do. Give them the opportunity that their mother and father paid for. And I challenge anybody to go into any upper level school and not find a successful homeschooler, because you will fail. And these are not hypotheticals, these are realities. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the Majority Leader to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know the senator didn't mean that homeschooled children don't flourish academically. I know that's not what you meant, because obviously we all know that some do, just like public school, private school, some do. Matter of fact, I think they have a higher ratio of flourishing academically. It doesn't matter that about, I think I got your number right, 0.0001% that think they're the next LeBron. I understand your concerns with that. This is not about those. This is about those kids that know they're not going to be pro athletes, know that they may not even make a college team. They just want to play. They just want to, with their peers, they want to go on a field, whether it be athletically, academically, or drama, and participate. And this has been going on in Virginia for over 45 years. So we've had a couple of stumbling blocks, and I know we mentioned it before that, we had some bugs with the GHSA to work out, and we have worked those out. And so I understand every decision we make here, there's a potential that something is going to go bad. But what I took from this morning's message, let fear be a visitor, not a resident, that resonated with me. Just let the kids play. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to make this brief. I'm going to start by just apologizing to the Mosley family who's out in the corridor right now, who frankly is offended. All they want to do is to represent not only their family and the legacy of Dexter Mosley. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know the scores of homeschoolers far, far exceed the scores of public school. So that myth is gone. I'm going to ask you as you get ready to vote your conscience. Vote your conscience right now. As homeschoolers around the state of Georgia right now are just asking for an opportunity to play in extracurricular activities. Maybe some of them it is sports, but there are many of them it's piano and band and voice and the arts and so on. And the next greatest person may come out of that. And they're partnering. This bill not only allows extracurricular activities from the homeschoolers, but it is the great partnering of public schools and homeschools, bringing communities back together. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask your favorable consideration on Senate Bill 51.
Senator has closed debate. We'll take up the amendment first. The question is on the adoption of amendment number 1 by the senator from the 14th. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and amendment number 1 is adopted. Is there objection agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. For what purpose does the senator from the 14th rise?
Isn't it true that a vote green for this is a vote for all of the students and kids within our community, bringing them together, homeschoolers and public schools?
The gentleman speaks with great passion, and that's for each and every member to determine on their own. Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 39, the nays are 15. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed as amended. Chair recognizes the majority leader for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Thursday, February 25th, 2021.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the announcements?
The Rules Committee will meet upon adjournment in room 450. The Health and Human Services Committee will meet at 1:30 in room 450. The Natural Resources and Environment Committee will meet at 1:30 in room 307 CLOB. The Georgia Department of Transportation Board election for the 4th Congressional District will meet at 2 p.m. in the Senate chamber. The Ethics Committee is canceled. The Georgia Department of Transportation Board election for the 11th Congressional District will meet at 3 p.m. in the Senate chamber. Finance Committee will meet at 3:30 in room 450. State and Institutions and Property will meet at 3:30 in mezzanine 1. Judiciary Committee will meet at 4:45 in room 307 CLOB. This completes the order, Mr. President.
Does any senator have an announcement? The chair sees none. The majority leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until Thursday, February 25th, 2021 at 10 a.m. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The yeas still have it. Senate will stand adjourned.